Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Canadian Story. We have David with us here today, but he is better known, Zach, as...
Viva, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Is it Frei?
It is Frei because it's a derivative of the first half of my last name.
Oh, they're perfect. Viva Frei. And I will say that Zach's mentor, Ian, is very excited about this episode because he watches a lot of your videos and is a huge fan. I'm a huge fan. I know Zach's a huge fan
as well.
So we're going to fanboy a little bit here. And we're just very happy with the stuff, with what you're doing and the voice you're giving to kind of the voiceless. So why don't you give us a 30-second bio, David, of who you are, what you're about, and then we'll go into why you love Canada.
Well, my 5-second shtick intro on YouTube is that I'm a Montreal litigator turned YouTuber. My full name is David Freiheit. Freiheit is German or Yiddish, depending on the circumstances. Literally means freedom. Frei is free. Heit is the state of. So when you have Fahrenheit, it's the
that
state
is a
of
pretty epic name to have.
Oh, yeah. So it is literally freedom. It was never that which dictated my desire or path to become a lawyer, but it's a good name for a lawyer. Youngest of 5 kids, Montreal born and raised. 4 of the 5 kids became lawyers. My father's a lawyer. Never a doubt in my mind as to what I was ever going to do in life until I started doing it. Became a lawyer, was sworn in 2007, and never loved a day of it in my life.
Wow.
Was always into the arts, video stuff. In CEGEP, I did film production. What's the word I'm looking for? Fine arts and film. Then I went into philosophy at McGill, but at some point got a GoPro as a lawyer, started making videos again, discovering the love for that, created the YouTube page. I sound like an old man now. I created the YouTube page. I created the channel, but didn't know what a channel was. I just started posting random videos. The squirrel video, which everyone knows probably is what made me famous by Quebec standards, was this viral video of a squirrel stealing a GoPro, carrying it up a tree and dropping it. It was everywhere. It's got like 5 million views in a week. So there I discovered you can actually make money on YouTube, but not in any sort of predictable way. But I just started making random quirky videos while I was practicing law. This is a lot longer than 30 seconds, but
no, this is great. Keep going.
So at some point, I was putting out a lot of videos, random stuff that was going viral, getting licensed. I discovered video licensing. And every time I would put out a video that would incidentally or touch tangentially on being a lawyer, it got consistent views, nowhere near like viral views, but always more than the minimum views that a non-viral video would get. And people were saying like, oh, that's very interesting. Do more of those. So, at one point I did a day in the life. Another point I did preparing for my last trial. So whenever I did these videos, they would get consistent viewership that would be different than the base that I had already had for this channel, which was random stuff. And at some point, someone just said, you should focus on law. And I said, I didn't. I wanted to get out of law and not to get back into law on YouTube. But, it was an amazing turn of events because at one point I said, I'm leaving law because I can't do this anymore. It's been over 10 years of practice. I hate it. If I don't get out now, I'm going to be 50 years old and angry. So I'm going to get out now. At the same time, started doing daily vlogging, but not consistently law-based. And then I started doing some law videos, but I did one video in particular, which was breaking down Alex Jones's deposition.
Right. And I can imagine that would have taken off.
I had no idea what happens on the interwebs when you talk about Alex Jones. Like I got into an entirely new crowd that I say without judgment. I mean, I just,
right.
People were out there. People would get angry depending on whatever you said when it involves Alex Jones. I just literally went into this. I had never seen Alex Jones's deposition in the context of the defamation case filed by the Sandy Hook parents. So I see in the news, they're talking about Alex Jones's deposition. And they're citing a 5-second clip where he says he was suffering from some form of psychosis. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to go see the deposition. Little did I know the deposition, at least the portion of it was 3.5 hours. And I said, that's great. They summarized the 3.5 hour deposition with 5 seconds. I said, I'm going to go watch it. I watched it. I was like, holy cows, this didn't go the way the media is portraying it as. And I said, I don't think anybody's going to know that. So I'm just going to break it down and explain it. I know how depositions go. I don't know Texas law. I don't know Texas procedure, but I know how you conduct a deposition. I broke it down. the video went, as far as law themed videos goes, quasi viral. It got a couple 100,000 views. And it launched the channel. I was like, holy cows, this is what I can do. I don't want to practice law, but I can break it down. I can explain it. I can make sense of it to non-lawyers. And the channel took an amazing direction. And then it just started snowballing from there.
It's amazing. I want to dig into a couple things you said before we move on to what you love about Canada, because I just love that you're willing to admit I made a choice in my life and I didn't like the outcome of that choice. And so instead of just being miserable and bitter at your life, you're like, well, I guess I'll change what I'm doing. So could you go into a bit more of like that emotional journey, that process? Because I think a lot of our listeners and myself are definitely in this boat. I was very unhappy with my life and where it was going until I started to just do the things that I loved. And now Zach and I talk about this all the time. We're the luckiest people in the world. We get to talk to people 3 times a week about the things that they love, or 3 to however many times, and we just learn every day.
What I like is that you pick up on something that has been meaningful to me that I've never actually talked about. I mean, I've talked about it, incidentally. Yeah, I always say I hated law. There was never a day that I practiced that I loved it more than the day before. And it is, the interesting thing is you spend, everything I did in my life was to prepare to be a lawyer. So 2 years in CEGEP at Dawson, 4 years philosophy at McGill, was to get, the mental training to go into law school. Then you do 3 years of law, 6 months bar school, 6-month internship, 4 years, you're in. And I struck gold, because coming out of law school, I got a job at what was one of the biggest law firms in Canada at the time. It's the 1% of law students that actually succeeds, passes the bar, and gets the offer at, one of the biggest firms in Canada. And at that point, you're a stagiaire, you know nothing. It's glorious. You're wearing a tie. You're going into a big office. You're taking an elevator in a skyscraper in downtown Montreal. You think you've struck gold, and in a way you have. But then that sort of sense of, I won't call it emptiness. It's just like, okay, the practice is what it is now. This is what it is as a stagiaire, which is an intern. It'll get better when I'm a young lawyer. As a young lawyer, it's like, okay, the practice seems a little unfulfilling. It'll be better next year. And I kept on saying this. I had a 6-month running timeline. I said, if it's not better and I don't like it more than 6 months,
then I'll stop.
Yeah, but then what happens? You get married and then you have a kid.
Yes.
and at one point I said, well, after my first kid, I didn't really love the practice. I didn't love the lifestyle. I didn't love the hours. I was going into work when my kid was asleep, coming back when she was asleep. I went at one point a week without seeing her awake. And then my wife is like, you're miserable. If something doesn't change, nothing's going to change. And literally Friday afternoon, there was just something that snapped. And I told my boss, I said, I can't do this anymore. I hope I'm not disappointing you too much. And we were all on great terms. It was the firm loves me still. They loved me then. But I said, I can't do this. So I had left with the idea of going into commercial photography. I reapplied to Dawson College. It's like a midlife crisis that is a textbook midlife crisis. He just had his first kid. He quits his job at a big firm and now
decides to go into photography.
and I did. I applied for commercial photography at Dawson. And before, I was put on a waiting list because they suspected that with my career path, I would not actually be a good student. They might have been right. But before I could get rejected, I started getting calls from clients and people who said, I want a lawyer. Now I'm on my own and I can charge, $250 an hour, which is cheap if you can believe it as far as lawyers go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the work came in faster than I could say no. So I overnight, rented a small office just on the corner of St. Catherine, and I started getting business. And then I worked my own practice, which was more fulfilling. And I said, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I can say no to the clients. I can do what I want. I can lead files the way I think is ethical and proper. Tremendous amount of stress, but this is what the practice was supposed to be. And it was liberating for about 4 to 5 years. And then it just, then you realize the practice is never going to change.
Right.
And so
right.
Then I said, at this point now I'm up to 2 kids, maybe 3, but I forget when the third one came into the picture. But at one point I said, no, I still don't love it. It's better because you can guide your destiny when you're your own boss. You can do what you think is proper at all times. You can fire clients. You don't have the overhead where you're stuck hanging on to clients you don't like. But I didn't like the practice. The practice was cutthroat. It was constant, unpleasant stress, paper pushing. you never really felt like you're making a difference because every day you're making somebody unhappy, even if you're making somebody else happy. And then I said, I still can't do it. And I said, I'm leaving. Started, part-time work at a marketing firm, part-time work as a lawyer, and daily vlogging for 2 years. And not making any money, by the way. I mean, this is where I leave a practice that's making good money. And I came so close to the financial edge that I'm not even sure my wife appreciates it now.
Has still forgiven you for that.
She can't forgive what she didn't know at the time. But
Right.
it was a wire. But at one point we were having the discussion, and I had made a video where I tied a bag to an iPhone and swung it around on a rope, and the bag caused the iPhone to slow down. Complicated thing to describe, but when you did it, the slow motion video of the phone spinning around on a rope using a bag for drag made it look like one of those 3D cameras.
Oh,
and I sold the video, and my wife says, "Look, if you can make money tying a plastic bag to an iPhone, we're going to be all right." And it turned out to be right, but it is. So I said, I can't do it. I'm gonna regret way too much, and it's never going to get easier to leave. You get the golden handcuffs, and I bit the bullet. I left law, wound up the practice. It took a year to wind up the practice. And that's a year not only with no income, it's a year with, I guess, outgo is the word.
Right. Yeah. You're bleeding.
We had lawyers.
Got cash burn going on.
Oh yeah, no, it's like, and we had lawyers who I was paying to wind down the files, to get everything in order so that we can give these files to the new lawyers. So it was a year of not just stagnant finances, like declined in finances. But in the meantime, started daily vlogging, learned how to edit quickly. And it all came together because when, now with my daily vlogs or my quasi daily vlogs, I can edit quickly and edit, relatively well. And I can get something out the day it happens. So I have developed this like formula to quickly tackle things that are going on in the legal world, give it a hyperactive ADD, the Family Guy-esque type delivery, which is engaging, and get it out the same day. So all of the experience and all of the suffering of the past culminated in preparing me to have found the voice that I've actually found, which I never would have thought I would have found in the first place.
And how does it make you feel? How do you feel about your life right now?
I will always feel stressed because it is in my genes. It's in my composition. I will always be up at night worrying about something. I will always, the expression I say, and it's someone else told me this, is anxiety or stress is a hook waiting for a jacket. And so I'll always have it. But at least now, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm thinking about the next video and I'm not thinking I forgot to do something in a file. And in that sense, it's a little better. In another sense, I definitely feel better that whatever stress I have in life is at the very least for something that I'm proud to contribute to the world.
Yes.
And so, being stressed that I forgot to sign an affidavit or forgot to, date a document in a litigation file that is going to, disappear one day and no one's going to care that it ever existed, and that it's going to leave people unhappy, even my own clients, even if we win, because it will have cost them tens of thousands of dollars. It's not a question of not leaving. It's not only a question of not leaving a good legacy or a meaningful legacy. It's that
question of leaving a legacy at all.
Yeah, it's what's the legacy? Pushing paper, having fought tooth and nail on a file that will not have contributed anything to the betterment of humanity. So the fact that I think I'm contributing something, I hope, but I think. And so at the very least,
what's really important is that people seem to be agreeing with you that you are contributing something, right? That's kind of how you know.
Yeah, well, my concern only is that I don't want to be contributing to the negative rage aspect of media. Like, it's easy to go out and just pick an article that's a dirty article and do something covering it and clicking into that sort of, I don't want to call it rage bait, but that rage sentiment. I want to have value added breakdowns, insightful, thoughtful discourse and breakdowns, even if the subject matter is controversial or ragey to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, what do you love about this country? Contribute to our podcast. This is what we ask everyone.
I love everything about this country except for the politicians. So I'm telling you, I'm born and raised, born in Montreal. I spent 1 year living in Paris. Paris was beautiful, but I spent 4 years in Quebec City. I love Quebec City. I love Montreal. I love the fact that we have wonderful, safe cities by and large, and even the parts that are not safe, where to avoid. I love that we have safe cities. I love the fact that we have nature 45 minutes outside of pretty much any city
everywhere.
in this
Like you can get to it's so true.
I love fishing. I love the outdoors. I love the marriage of the outdoors and city life. I love the fact that we are by and large polite, happy people. Now, whether or not I see that changing, and that is part of what's bothering me over the last year, is a separate issue. But that's what I love about Canada. I would have said back in the day, I love our freedoms and I love our freedom of speech. Yeah. But I am seeing those deteriorate and
they're being
erode.
deteriorated. Yeah. Well, let's get into that, because this is undoubtedly the most important thing happening right now, from my perspective, is that we are slipping into a framework in which totalitarianism can blossom, and seems to be blossoming due to the fear of our population of a cold. I'm going to call it that. I previously would not have, but I just feel like the death rate is not commiserate with our response. So I'd love your thoughts on why. Why is this being allowed to happen?
Well, I don't know. I won't even call it a cold or a pandemic, or it is what we know of it now: 99.97% survival rate, and the at-risk categories, we know who they are. So call it whatever you want. We'll just call it COVID.
Yeah,
but we are using a virus, because that's what it is, as the pretext and the basis for annihilating everything and anything that ever made Western society free and democratic. And it's all being done under the pretext of massively hyped up fear that has been hyped up and imposed on the population day in and day out for over a year. And I have seen the way it has impacted people who started off, I would say realistic, started off with a grasp on things, and who have just succumbed to the day in and day out fear mongering. And we're not talking about a Spanish flu type pandemic. We're not talking about Ebola type mortality rates. I have seen the way people have been transformed by the fear that is being propagated by the media and the politicians. And what do I think? I mean, I never would have thought it would be so easy to get people to willingly abandon their most fundamental civil rights and liberties under the pretext of it providing some form of additional security that it probably, in my humble opinion, is not actually providing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I want to dig into this more, because I think people need to speak up about this. That's why, I mean, Zach and I started this podcast during the second lockdown, because we were like, well, we want to have something to do, right? Like we were like, and increasingly, I have become convinced that we are a nation run by timid people. So timid that they are unwilling to directly have a single death on their hands, which frankly, I think makes them lose the moral authority to govern, because government is making hard decisions and they are refusing to make hard decisions and crushing people because of their own cowardice.
They're passing the political buck in a way that makes them, in a way, politically blameless, in the sense that they're just washing their hands of it and saying, well, we're just listening to the experts, except the experts are political appointees who are effectively handpicked by the politicians themselves and answer to the politicians themselves. And so you have this incestuous, vicious circle of politics dictating science to some extent, where the politicians say, well, we're just doing what the experts say. The experts are saying, well, we're just advising the politicians who appointed us. And there is no discourse among diverging theories or diverging opinions among the experts, which is not what science is about in the first place. But, you know, I wouldn't say the politicians are cowards or timid. I think, it's very easy to cloak the tyranny in benevolence, which is typically how it's done. The government sees an opportunity, to quote Chrystia Freelander, an epiphany. They've seen an epiphany of a moment where they can exploit this crisis to put forward their political program. So I'm for anybody who might be listening to this thinking I'm a conspiracy theorist nut, these are verbatim their words. This is Justin Trudeau referring to this as an opportunity for a great reset to fast track their pre-pandemic plans. You have Chrystia Freelander literally saying that this is a window, a political opportunity, an epiphany, verbatim. The politicians know what they're doing, and it's very easy to pretend that every decision they're making is in the best interest of the general population when their only unit of measurement and their only basis of comparison is COVID deaths. I tweeted out. It's a very, very, if I may say so myself, a blistering tweet. But I said François Legault's lockdown measures have killed more kids than COVID. And someone said, well, how do you know? I was like, well, I know in Quebec, only 2 people under 20 have died from COVID. And that's even assuming that it was from COVID. I don't know what the other underlying issues are. 2, I know for a fact that more than 2 people have committed suicide, died of drug overdoses, or other issues that are
because of COVID. Lockdown.
Direct result of the lockdowns. And people, when you only use one unit of measurement, there's no comparison to the trade-offs for that policy. But for anybody to pretend that there's no trade-off,
that's the absurdity of this. That is the absolute absurdity of this, is that they're not even they refuse to even talk about the other things.
No, well, they refuse to. Not only do they refuse to talk about the other things, but I guess not only, but there's a reason why. I mean, when other types of death have basically decreased to the point of nil, and all of it's being attributed to COVID, like heart disease, cancers are down, flu deaths are down, and so it allows you to say how bad one number is while totally ignoring the others. And then if you have the discussion, you're a COVID denier, which is the new term that's going around.
This feels like a religion.
I never make that particular comparison because I don't want to denigrate religion, because I think there's a great amount of good that comes out of religion, even if I'm not religious myself. I would say more superstition, because when I see someone walking alone on the street wearing a face mask, just call me a science denier. There are no science to that. It is pure superstition. Someone who has in their own mind and soul convinced themselves that this gesture shall bestow to them the good fortune of protection from a virus when they are outdoors and no one is around to give it to them. Setting aside the idea, the efficiency or necessity of masks outdoors to begin with, even in groups. There was a study that was published in the Irish Times that showed like 1 in 1,000 cases of transmission occur from outdoor transmission. Setting that aside, when I see people biking without a helmet wearing a face mask, I know not only is it
that you've entered the twilight zone.
Oh, it's next level. I mean, I literally see people on kids on skateboards wearing a face mask, no helmet. Oh, but yeah, concussions aren't contagious. That's the catchphrase.
The one that levels me is the people driving around by themselves in their cars wearing the mask.
Well, so I've had that same reflex. I say benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're in someone else's car, or maybe someone else is good. I'll try to before I agree, but I say maybe they're in someone else's car and they're that scared that they think it's in the air conditioning system of the car. But it is superstitious at this point, and I don't care that anyone says trust the science. When you have Biden saying that even after being fully vaccinated, he's going to wear a mask outdoors just to be sure, that's not science anymore. That is literally superstition. Doing something
it's virtue
that you don't have to
too,
do,
right?
Sorry?
It's virtue signaling too.
Well, it's political signaling. Yeah. Like you do it to show that you care about others. But no, it's not science anymore. It really has morphed into the realm of superstition, signaling to the extent that you have to show everybody that you are concerned. And what easier way to do it? Wear a face mask when you're outdoors. It's anyhow, But
just to go back to the point, both Zach and I are people of faith, so I don't want to denigrate faith, but I see religion as a very different beast, because it's organized, and not that the problem isn't even that it's organized. The problem is that when you become an ideologue, when truth is one thing and cannot be any other thing. And that's what's happened with this. There's no openness for debate. There's no democratic anything. It's just, no, this is the truth. And if you don't believe it, you're a heretic and you need to be shunned, right? Or you need to be excommunicated, i.e. canceled, right? And I just find it so fascinating that people have bought into this hook, line, and sinker. Zach and I were saying, we started a podcast about loving Canada, and we've never been so ashamed of our fellow citizens.
People have bought into it because they have been tormented into it. They, on the one hand, they've either been tormented into fear, or they've just been beaten into submission to the point where, like, yeah, just give me the mask and stop complaining. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Just give me, I'll go take the vaccine, even if I'm a 25-year-old healthy person, even if the risks of the vaccine are arguably greater than the risks of the virus. I'll just do it because I'm tired of the discussion. I'm tired of the pressure. And absolutely, I've always been proud to be a Canadian. I've always been proud to be who I am. This is my homeland. And when I first started doing the vlogs, I was getting made fun of by Americans because they're like, oh, you guys have no freedom of speech out there. Comedians get fined for jokes.
Right.
This was before COVID. And I was like, no, I mean, you may or may not be right. They complain about our lack of gun rights. I never appreciated any of this, but it all got fast tracked. And my understanding, like literally taking the red pill and waking up outside of the matrix when all of this COVID stuff started going down. And then you see the way the government passes laws without public discussion, issue invasive laws as to who you can have in your house, what you can post on social media, what you have to wear outside of your house. And I see, my God, it happened so quickly, but everyone's like, no, it's been happening. You just never noticed it. And now this has been the catalyst that has launched into hyperdrive. But the idea that our government can tell us who we can have in our own homes, what time we can leave our own homes. And not only are people not objecting to it en masse, a lot of people are saying it's not enough. We need more, as if we as individuals are not able to make our own decisions, and as if we as individuals are not in charge of our own lives anymore. We have daddy government to tell us what to do.
Well, and the worst part in my mind, and I was a partisan for most of my life. Right now I feel a little bit lost, but I will say this, the part that really makes me angry is that these people who are conservative politicians who claim that they care about freedom, who've built their entire careers on these assertions that about freedom and democracy and religious freedom too, are now some of the most tyrannical in the country.
I can't imagine it getting even more tyrannical. Just yesterday, I was doing a live stream with a journalist named George Samueli, born in Hungary. His father was persecuted under communism. His great uncle was executed under communism. And we're talking about the difference between Russia and Canada. People look at Russia and reflexively say, what a tyrannical, communist country, no freedom, Putin's an awful dictator. And in Canada, we locked up a pastor for 35 days in jail.
I know.
On the basis of charges that it's themselves never had any jail time, but for the fact that they got him on a bail condition, which itself, the result of the original arguably unconstitutional penalties in the first place, is the only charge that carried any potential jail time. Kept in jail for 35 days in solitary at one point, because that was the quarantine procedure in jail. It's like, if this happened in Russia, we would be all over this, judging them. But here we're saying, well, he should have just been following the Health Measure Act of closing the church down.
Yeah, he you know what? The charter doesn't matter because,
we're in an emergency pandemic. So forget the charter, forget all of the rights that were guaranteed by that charter, the right to freedom of religion, freedom of enjoyment of property, interprovincial travel,
movement,
peaceful assembly,
peaceful assembly.
Because you have a virus which has a 0 point whatever percent fatality rate, 80 some odd percent of which is in a certain demographic. Strip everyone of their fundamental rights and liberties, and people are going to willingly do it if you ingrain and you smash in this irrational fear over the course of a year. And the way in which it's done, also, if it were done in North Korea or Russia, you'd be saying, holy cows, this is what happens when you have corrupt media. But you literally, in Canada, have a media that is subsidized in the ordinary run of things by the government. Now, during the pandemic, these, radio and television, which was already starved for ad dollars, is getting millions of dollars a month from the governments to run these COVID ads. So it's profitable for the dying legacy media that is television and radio. They're getting government dollars. And so they're working in tandem with the government with unlimited funds coming from the taxpayers to indoctrinate them to be irrationally fearful of this virus with the statistics we know. And if this were in any other country where the government was literally subsidizing the media to promote a message that the government was then exploiting to enact draconian unconstitutional laws, you'd have a field day. I mean, you would never think that it could happen here. But here now in Canada, it's become the accepted norm, and people are so terrified that they think they need more of it.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part to me. It's like I stopped being afraid of COVID a very, very long time ago. I am now in fear of
your own
realization of living in a country where the things that I heard about in tyrannical regimes are happening now in my country. And it's terrifying to know that is happening.
No. And, Gina Carano, for anybody who doesn't know, I've never seen her in The Mandalorian, but I know the scandal. She was in The Mandalorian, got canceled because of an Instagram post that equated the political ambiance in the United States to pre-World War II Germany. I don't draw those analogies, but I do have some reflexive fears when I hear the government talking about a QR code coming by mail as evidence of vaccination, because I can only see where that goes, and none of it is good. A QR code for proof of vaccination, in my mind, means not only does the government expect you to get vaccinated, not only do they expect you to carry papers of vaccination, but they want to be able to have electronic, easy access proof of vaccination, which means that, in my mind, the long-term rationale is to have some form of immediate verification, which means that it's going to be for immediate use or immediate demand. And people made the inflammatory comparisons to, carrying your papers to be out at night, carrying the papers as proof of vaccination to certain eras in human history that were not good ones. And like, we're going one step further now that you want to have digital proof. I mean, this is science fiction level deterioration of society at a pace that you can't imagine.
You couldn't have predicted this. If 2 years ago someone had told me, hey, Canadians will stay in their homes for 14 months, there will be a large portion of the population that will not even leave their homes, that will not go and see their own family members because the government told them not to, I would have laughed. And now...
They laughed. And not just that, and the courts would hold it up.
Oh,
at least for the time.
And not just the courts, like everybody. Like and so I want us to move to this because this is getting a little bit sad. There are people standing up. There are protests happening in Montreal. There are protests happening, and I will say this: in Ontario, we have police officers standing up. Right in Alberta,
I have a copy
we're
of that lawsuit that I've been asked to do to review that lawsuit of the police officers.
Yes, it's awesome. I'm really and then there's rodeos happening in Alberta. So there's hope. There are people who are fed up, and to all the people, because I know there's a lot of people who feel alone in this because they're surrounded by people who are afraid. And I just think it's really important for us to get the message out there. A bad law is no law at all.
Well,
you do not
bad
have
law
to
is no
obey.
law at all. But I am a lawyer, and so I am very careful too, and make sure not to advocate that anyone break the law. My rationale, if I ever get a ticket, I will contest it, but I can never recommend or encourage others to go out and actively
and I
break the
understand
law.
you can't, but I can, and I'm actively encouraging everyone to. And if anyone would like to arrest me for that, they are welcome to. You will make me explode in popularity. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that is the paradox, I guess, of the Streisand effect. Is it's what happened with Pastor Coates and the Grace Life Church. It's like it brought it to the forefront. If anyone were on the fence, it certainly pushed them off the fence. And for anyone who wasn't on the fence that thinks this is justifiable, I found an interesting correlation between people who don't care about that and people who don't think religion is important, which is an amazing thing. But for the optimistic side, I talk to a lot of people, not just the however many hundreds of thousands from YouTube or tens of thousands on Twitter, people in real life who I know politically. I don't consider myself to be to the right, but I know that these people are politically to the left. I know that these people started off saying whatever the government says we'll do. And now they're at the point where everyone's like organizing clandestine illicit activities. So I've seen people turn. And in as much as I've seen people go off the deep end with the fear, I've seen people who were on one end of the spectrum now realizing this is not a life. So there's the optimism there. And there's the optimism. But the flip side is there's a lot of people who I think get too used to this, there's a lot of people who are now traumatized into not being able to fathom anything different. And you in a way, my fear is that you could have restructured, reconditioned society to come out of this with different expectations. Now people are expecting, not to have to fend for themselves, not to have to produce for themselves, not to have to be productive on their own, and just, do what the government says. And for anybody who says that that's like a hyperbolic or exaggerated way of looking at this, when people say, I'm not going out at 8:00, well, the government does have to compensate for that impact at some point, and people are just going to end up being totally reliant on the government for sustenance and direction. So, we'll see who turns and how many people turn. My other concern is that, the people who come out and protest get demonized by the people who don't. And this is actually how you just divide a society, which is great for the government yet again, because the more social lack of cohesion there is, the more social strife, the more you get to go from, well, now we have to manage not only COVID, but we have to manage the social upheaval. So bring in the military. So it's just a question of how the grassroots uprising among the people is one thing, but this requires full political change, and it requires a change from the top down as well. So I don't know when the next elections are, but they can't come fast enough.
Oh, you said that right.
I think we had Eric, the conservative leader for Quebec, on the podcast, and he said similar things. But I do think we're going to see a big change. On a personal note, I spent a year of my life helping Jason Kenney to become Premier of Alberta. And it was one of the things that I was fairly proud of in my life. And I will say right now, and I publicly bash him every day now and say that I'm actively working to make sure he does not remain premier. Right. And
I voted for François Legault. I didn't work to get him elected. I voted for him. Seemed like a decent guy. Early on in this pandemic, he seemed decent as well. But when you go from, a reasonable response to, I can't say pathological lying, because I don't know if he believes what he's saying, but everything he's saying is just 4-week curfew in January to not overwhelm the hospitals during Christmas. And if we're good, things will be better. 4 months later, we are at less numbers than we were when that curfew was implemented. And there's not even a discussion to remove it. It's as though it's a lie from the beginning, and they hope people forget. And in that 4 months, just traumatize people more and more and get them used to living under such conditions so that they never expect anything different. It is the spiritual loss of the expectation of freedom that is the most dangerous thing in all of this.
Yes, there it is. The spiritual loss of the expectation of freedom. That's the title of the episode.
And you know what? I'm going to go tweet that out right after this.
Yes. Good. So we try to keep it under 50 minutes for the listeners, because people don't like. I have another podcast that's sometimes 3 hours long, and people don't like that. So
unless you're Joe Rogan, I guess.
Yeah. So. To summarize, to finalize, let's end on a spark of hope. How do you see ways that people can create that expectation of freedom again?
People need to have an honest discussion with their own fears, because you say you're not scared of COVID. I'll be honest. I'm a neurotic person in general. If I think I'm getting sick, I get fearful, and it's like, oh my God, if I get COVID, it's going to be the most embarrassing thing. If I'm the guy who's been complaining about these lockdowns, if I get it and die, it's going to be so embarrassing. The second I get sick, it's like, holy cows, you have to get the irrational fear part of your head under control and then work into the rational parts. And you also have to just accept the fact that life is finite. We are going to die of something. And you have to determine, on the one hand, what quality of life you want to have, what expectations for a free society you have, and then work your way around that. More freedom typically means more risk.
Yep, absolutely. And that's okay. That is okay, people. Risk is where the reward is.
There's that also, but I just have the discussion with people. It's like, it went from flatten the curve to COVID zero, quite literally, is the new catchphrase from many doctors. And you have to balance things. People are, you look at, well, we saved, everyone says you want to save granny. If one young person dies prematurely as a result of these measures, I don't know how you measure this. Do you measure it by life?
I think years of life.
Aggregate?
Why not years of life? That's a perfectly fine measurement.
You measure it by aggregate years, because, if you take 40 years off of somebody's life, is that worth 1 year of 40 people? I don't know how you do this calculation, which is why it's an absurd thing in the first place. But one thing is for certain, even if you're fearful, you have to do the mental calculations as to what the costs are going to be of these measures. The cure cannot be worse than the illness. And we're getting into a situation, they're canceling elective surgeries, which is undoubtedly going to shorten people's lifespans by significant portions. And I don't need to be a doctor to know this. People not going to the dentist is going to have long-term impacts. Elective surgeries, cancer diagnoses, but these psychological issues that we are burdening our young people with are going to materialize in years to come. So even if you are fearful, at some point you have to say, well, this is the new fear of the new normal. The new normal should never be about getting used to living under draconian, totalitarian conditions. The new normal might just have to be accepting the fact that there's an additional risk to a free life right now. And like I've been saying from the beginning, I'm not just issuing blanket criticism without a solution or proposal. Someone said to me a year ago, well, what do you propose? I said, you lock down or isolate or protect the vulnerable, and you let those who are not vulnerable, on the one hand, continue to maintain freedom, continue to maintain society, continue to earn, to pay taxes, to subsidize the infrastructure that is needed to protect the vulnerable. What we've done here is a wholesale destruction of freedoms. It's a wholesale destruction of the infrastructure itself, and it's going to catch up to us. So the only question is, do people realize this sooner than later, or do they realize it only once we're in the point of a irreversible economic and institutional collapse? I think people are going to turn around sooner than later. I think we are robust.
I hope so.
Society is robust. Humans are robust. But the one thing I have also noticed, courage is contagious. Speaking your voice makes other people realize they're not alone. They will support you publicly or privately, but people need motivation. They need encouragement, and they need to know that it's okay to voice your discontent with things that are going on if you think that they're objectively objectionable.
I love that. And on a personal note, for me, I just want to say both of my parents recently got COVID. They have it right now. And I had exactly the fear that you said, where I was like, I've been publicly attacking the premier of my home province for his shutdowns. And now my parents have it. But they're in their 60s, right? They are more vulnerable. My dad just recovered from cancer, and yet they're fine. They are.
But the funny thing is, I have a genuine belief that any responsible adult who loves their kids and loves their grandkids and loves their country would say, and I know this from experience because I know some old people who have had it, who haven't had it, who are fearful, they would not want to cripple their children and their grandchildren's futures because of this risk. And it is not a question of, even if I were to get it, God forbid, and I pass away, the lesson of that story would not be destroy society because it might have saved my life.
Exactly.
The moral of that story would be, we have to live with this. We have to do our best, but we have to do our best while respecting that which we were protecting in the first place. A life in prison it's not a life. Now, and I'm not saying run out and lick lampposts or have COVID parties.
No.
The flip side is, a person who dies from COVID is not proof that these measures were all justified. And especially knowing where the majority of these people have died, it's actually proof that everything the government has been doing has it has not been solving the problem they have been purporting that it wants to solve, which can lead people to question why the government's doing it. But I cannot determine motivations. I can only determine outcomes. The government has actually systematically failed to protect the most vulnerable while systematically penalizing the least vulnerable and effectively compromising the health, the well-being, and the institutions of our country. And it's a very, very big problem. And there will be a day of reckoning.
Oh, there will be. Elections. There will be.
I hope. But there will
be.
The other thing is, if this is not reflected in the polls next election, at some point I might depressingly have to say, this country is not what I think it should be, and make my own decisions. But
we're all descended from immigrants who fled bad countries. So if that day comes where we have it in our blood.
Well, I can still consider this my country, but it's like the old expression, sometimes the party, you don't leave the party leaves you. I can't fight the majority. If the majority of people vote this stuff in for future years, okay, I'll just have to. It's a relationship. I'll have to find a new country that I love and that loves me back, and that we share the same morals and values.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on, David. It's really an honor to have you here, and you have been so articulate in so many of my own feelings, and I know Zach's as well. So thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.